It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life, from the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous and not so famous, the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, Dr. Abdel Nuriddin. Hello, Doctor. How are you?
I'm doing very well, Mr. Coleman, and you?
Oh, doing fine, thank you. Thank you for coming on the show.
Good.
It's nice to have you here.
Well, I thank you for the invitation.
So we're going to be talking about your latest book called Help Yourself to Ultimate Health, Know the Causes, Symptoms, and Solutions to Optimal Health. On your bio, I see a something called naturopathic. Now, I've never heard that term before.
Yes, naturopathy. Yeah, but it's naturopathic. Yeah,
naturopathic.
But naturopathy is the actual science.
I see.
So
Okay.
we're naturopathics. Yeah, we're naturopathic professionals.
Is this like homeopathic?
Somewhat, yes. And we're looking at the entire body. We're looking at the holistic aspect of the human being, the body, the mind, the spirit, the total human being, and we seek to address it all.
Okay, so it's almost similar to Chinese medicine, yeah?
Well, it carries some of that in it too. You know, some of the content of my book addresses Eastern medicine, particularly as it relates to cleansing and detoxing of certain organs at certain times of the year. Which we all need to know how to go about doing that in this part of the world. It would save us a lot of problems that we actually have, and most of us don't practice that. But the summer, the fall, the winter, and the spring, we're affected by the cosmic order, physiologically and biologically, just like everything else is in nature. And Eastern medicine, for the most part, has suggested that we cleanse certain organs at certain times of the year, and it's beneficial. So this is annual cleansing of various organs in the body to help to maintain their health, or restore it, or repair it, or renew it, whatever's necessary based on where you're being caught or found when you come into that knowledge. Like this time of year here, we're in the fall. And this is the time of the year for you to clean up the respiratory tract. This is the time of year where they're talking about, colds and flus and so on and so forth. So we suggest and recommend that you clean up the respiratory tract this time of the year and get rid of the catarrh and the mucus that actually has built up over the year. And if you do that, then you save you save a lot of stress and trauma from the body. And in many cases, you don't have to worry about flu shots and those type of things because you're actually preserving yourself by taking these necessary precautions by cleaning up the respiratory tract.
Well, so it's sort of akin to cleaning the filters in your furnace in the fall and your air conditioning in the spring.
You got it. That's it. And I mean, okay. That pattern has come. Yeah, that's where it comes from. It comes off the human body. And man took it, started to realize that that's what he needed to do in order for him to preserve his home and preserve his appliances and those type of things that he's using on a regular basis. And what he realized is that if he does it annually, then he saves himself money. And time. It's like you've got an amortization on a house that's 30 years. You don't do any cleansing on it. Or repairs on it. After 30 years, it's breaking down. You paid for it, not paid for, but what is it worth? So it's that same principle. Work on it regularly. Do some maintenance on it on a regular basis, and you'll have it for a much longer period of time.
Well, what are we doing wrong in this country then? Are we just treating people symptomatically and not really going to the cause of the problem? Doctors are just writing prescriptions and telling you to go?
Well, that's pretty much it. I mean, allopathic medicine, they go to school to learn how to operate, sedate, and medicate. They don't go to school to learn about foods, how foods affect you. That's not the curriculum that they go through. So basically, what they're doing is treating symptoms. So they're on the curative side. We're on the preventive side. Ours is to prevent yourself from having to go there. And the way you go about doing it is making better choices. So basically, for the most part, we're just making bad choices as a public, and we're not educated along those lines to make those choices that are necessary in order to build better health. That's what ultimate, help yourself to ultimate health is all about. Because only you can build better health and ultimate health. But you got to know how to go about doing it. It starts really in the kitchen. What are we eating? What are we consuming? The food groups, the carbohydrates, the fats, and the proteins, the fibers. What's really leading to most of these problems that we have today? And I'm talking from the common cold to cancer. And we can look at the food groups. And as we study the food groups, we come to recognize that certain foods are going to contribute to the problems that we're having. And if we don't cut those foods, diminish the consumption of those foods, because in most cases we're not going to take them all. Not going to take them all out of the diet. We don't necessarily have to take all of it out of the diet, but we do need to be conscientious of how much of it we're consuming. First and foremost, particularly your carbohydrates. The standard American diet is pretty much sugar and carbohydrates. And I say sugar because it is a carbohydrate, but the cereal, the pasta, the cakes, the cookies, the rolls, the donuts, the bagels, and the pasta and the pizza, that's pretty much the standard diet. And it's heavily laden with sugar. That sugar produces an enormous amount of glucose in the bloodstream, which causes the pancreas to become trigger happy and secrete more insulin that's necessary. And we become insulin resistant. And once we become insulin resistant because of these carbohydrates, then the problems really start. Then the sugar gets out of balance. And this is where obesity comes from. This is where the diabetic condition comes from. This is where the inflammation comes from. So we can trace it back basically to the carbohydrates. So our recommendation as naturopaths is you need the oils, you need the flax, you need omega-3, omega-6, omega-9, the flax oils, you need the olive oils, the borage oils, you need the oils. Around 1960, somewhere in there, Ansel Keys basically came out and said that we needed a high carbohydrate, low fat diet. And that's pretty much what the American public started to eat. And we can track from 1960 to 1980 what happened. Maybe 14% of the people were obese or overweight in 60, and by the time we got to 80, now you had over 30% of the people overweight. And now today, you can look at almost 4 out of 5 people overweight and obese. So where is it coming from? It came from the high carbohydrate, low fat diet. So it needs to be switched around. People need to become conscious of the consumption of the fat and slow down the consumption of the carbohydrates. If we do this, then you start to build better health, and you can literally have ultimate health. So it doesn't matter where I'm finding you at this particular point. If you'll start making these type of choices, if you'll start to choose better health by making better choices relevant to what's going on in your kitchen, then tomorrow will be different. And we're only talking, we're talking 12 to 16 weeks, basically what's necessary in order for the body to really adjust itself for you to get in what we would classify as a keto state, a ketogenic state, where now you got more ketosis in the blood than you do the sugar. So,
okay.
I mean, that's really what it is.
Well, at some point, the Atkins diet came out, and that flipped it around, because I know the Atkins diet is high fat, low carb, right?
Yeah. Well, what Atkins did, Atkins had his own problems. He looked at his own. He was hypertensive. He was overweight. He was borderline diabetic. And so he looked at it. He says, okay, well, where's this coming from? The question is why? And it's a question that we should all be asking ourselves all the time. The question is why? Why am I feeling this way? Why do I have this weight? Why am I lacking energy? Why can't I sleep well? Why doesn't my bowel move the way that it should? So Atkins looked at it and he says, well, so he looked at the food groups. He looked at the carbohydrates, the fats, the proteins, and the fibers. And basically what he came, and I subscribed to his philosophy, was that you don't really need the carbohydrates at the level that we're consuming them. But you do need the protein, the fat, and the fiber. So he saw those as essential. He didn't see the carbohydrates as essential. So the recommended daily allowance at that time was 300 grams a day. He said, well, I'm going to cut it back to 20 grams a day. And he cut it back to 20 grams a day, and then he started watching all of his numbers come into range. He started losing weight. The numbers started to come into range, and then he started putting all of his clients on it. Well, the medical industry at that particular time looked and said, well, that's not correct in terms of what he's doing. We have these heart problems. We're having problems with people with strokes and cardiovascular problems, and he's telling people that they need to eat more fat and so on and so forth. But he was right. They did need to eat more fat, and they needed to take the carbohydrates out of the diet. So he was right in that, but they went after him. Well, but he had produced about 10 million books, or by that particular time. And he did make some adjustments. He did come out and say, well, you do need some carbohydrates in the diet, so on and so forth. But by that time, they had really started to castigate him and whatever. But there's still many people today still following his philosophy and his theory, and it works. There's not a question as to whether it works. You do need these essential fats. You do need essential amino acids, and you do need the fibers in the diet. And if you got to compromise, and you should compromise when it comes to your diet, then you compromise with the carbohydrates. Leave the carbohydrates on the table and eat the fats, the proteins, and the fibers.
Okay. You had mentioned at the beginning of the interview, and we talked about, you said certain cleansing organs at certain times of the year. How does one go about doing that? How do you cleanse your respiratory system?
Herbal botanicals. There are many herbal botanicals out there that a person can use that address the respiratory tract, your bronchioles, your sinuses. These herbal botanicals have been used since time immemorial by man to actually break up catarrh and mucus, and there are many of them out there. It's just books that you can get. In fact, we're so heavily laden today on the internet that you can pretty much Google anything to clean up the respiratory tract, and you'll get advice. It's always suggested that you connect with your practitioner when you start using these herbal botanicals. But they're there, and they've been there for a very, very long time. Our parents, our forebears, had this knowledge and had this science, many of them in this part of the world, and they knew that all they had to do was go out in the backyard or go out into the field and pull up the shrubs, or pull up or take the bark off of the tree, or use the roots or those things from the tree, and they took them and they boiled them. And they had us drinking them, and they had us using them, and they used them as salves, and they used them as balms. They had that type of knowledge and how to go about doing it. And it wasn't until, things changed and the Food and Drug Administration came out with all of its regulations to cause man to relinquish pretty much following those type of traditions. So we don't use these things. We don't consider these things, like at this time of year, to be using cold foot or something like that to help break up the mucus in the respiratory tract. You're getting ready to go into the winter. It's time to clean up the kidneys. I mean, that's the pipe system in the body. So there's gravel root out there. There's a number of things out there that will help you flush and clean up your kidneys. If you do this annually, you save your kidneys. I mean, dialysis is big, it's huge. I mean, these clinics are opening up every day all around the world, all around the country. And pretty much it's coming from basically what I suggested or what I was explaining to you early in terms of the carbohydrates. But there are many herbal botanicals out there and homeopathic remedies out there that can be used to help clean up the kidneys. You're going to go into the winter, into the spring. In the springtime, it's time for you to clean up the liver. So many things in nature to help you clean up your liver. And then the summertime, you're cleaning up the heart and the circulatory system. So this is annual, seasonal cleansing, annual cleansing. If we take it and start using it on a regular basis, then we literally start preserving ourselves. Many of these problems that we're having that are affecting us as the American public, they start to go away. And it's all based on cause and effect. So starts in the kitchen. We need better choices. Drugs and pharmaceuticals, they have their place. I think America has some of the best hospitals. We've got some of the best practitioners in the world in allopathic medicine. Our hospitals are probably better staffed, or they have been. COVID has really taken its toll on us. And they're better staffed and they're better equipped. But none of us want to have to stay in the hospital overnight if we don't have to stay in the hospital overnight. But that service is there for many of us, but none of us want to have to go that way. So the key is to get on the preventive side. Let's get on the preventive side. Let's start using these herbal botanicals before we have to. And they'll tell you, I'm in Orlando, Florida here. I was just doing a workshop here this weekend in Orlando. And one of the things that I was saying to the public here this weekend is that we're told in many cases that many of these medications that's being prescribed for you, you're going to have to take these for the rest of your life. And I had medical doctors in the audience here this weekend. And they were testifying to basically what I said. No medication is prescribed for a person to have to take for the rest of their life. It does work for a while, but you shouldn't have to take a medication for your entire life. All of the books that I had to read while I was in school, none of them said to me, and I had to read medical books. I had to read those books that doctors read, and none of them said you should take a medication. And all of the doctors, medical doctors that I've talked to down through the years, have said no medication. You should have to take no medication for the rest of your life. Get on a medication. So that's what they tell us on the statin drugs and some of the other drugs that are out there. This is, you're going to have to be using this. Why do they tell us that? Well, because in most cases, people won't change their diet. When the diet is wrong, when it's wrong, medicine don't work anyway. When the diet is wrong, medicine doesn't work. When the diet is correct, medicine is of no use. So, but we don't think from that standpoint in this part of the world. So it's not, and I'm not saying to anybody today that's on medication, stop using your medication. No, you have to work that out with your doctor. But I'm saying if you'll start to improve your diet, then you'll start to see that much of that medication that you're on, that you're taking, you won't have to take all of that medication once you start correcting your diet.
So your book is called Help Yourself to Ultimate Health. We do have to kind of wind this down. The book is out now.
Okay. It is.
Yeah.
Yep. You can go to drnuriddinbooks.com and get copies of it, hard copies. It's also soft copies, also in Kindle. drnuriddin.com. That's DRNURIDDIN books, BOOKS.com.
Okay.
And
great.
you can get copies of it from there. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. This was interesting. And best of luck with your work.
Yes, sir. I thank you very much for your invitation. And hopefully people benefited as a result of us being here with you today.